2021 is now in session. Pam, roll call, please.
Mrs. Belford?
Present.
McDougall?
Present.
Jenkins?
Present.
Mrs. Campbell?
Present.
And Mr. Susan?
Present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business today is information on budget priorities. Cindy Lisinski, Chief Financial Officer, will provide this information to us. Ms. Lisinski.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. Today I want to give you an update on what we have accomplished, where we are today, and what we know and what we don't know as we prepare for the 21-22 budget. I can assure you we will build our budget based on our district priorities. So we showed this slide, the next two slides actually, during the June budget workshop, and they remain very relevant today. Before the pandemic, BPS faced a triple challenge: sustaining and accelerating our student learning and excellence, tackling our unsustainable self-insured health plan while covering unfunded mandates such as FRS, and managing declining enrollment as charter and scholarship options continue to grow. The pandemic grew our challenges and uncertainty as we navigate this year and into the out years. As you know too well, we are addressing increased academic and social needs of our students and families, from remote and e-learning and keeping our students and staff safe in our brick and mortar schools. We continue to tackle our rising costs in healthcare and unfunded mandates. And to add to the challenge, I've learned that very few additional dollars are provided to the FEFP that are not targeted to an initiative specified in law. This hampers our flexibility and ability in spending operating dollars. Finally, we face greater pressure due to the $3.4 billion general revenue shortfall the state is wrestling with right now over the next 2 years. On top of potential cuts, we will have a significant reduction in enrollment next year. So before we look ahead, let's look at the issues that we prepared for and tackled this year. Actually, this slide should lead with great news. Commissioner Corcoran held districts harmless based on the 2020 projected enrollment, not only for the fall semester, but also for the entire school year. This allowed us to maintain current staff and amazing teachers in the district to focus on the critical work of delivering the best educational services possible with our operating supports in place. In my opinion, Commissioner Corcoran was looking at the long game, because these actions help us keep the great teachers on the other end of the pandemic, sustain high standards of education, and remain the best provider of education in Brevard. Although we are being held harmless, though, districts with enrollments that have declined will receive a proration to cover the few districts that experienced enrollment growth. And that's to cover about $17 million. And Brevard's early estimate projection is somewhere between $500,000 and $1.5 million. Finally, there is no expectation that hold harmless will continue into the next year. Districts will be funded at the projected enrollment next year. And more great news, voters approved the six-year half-cent surtax capital renewal. And we can't forget that the surtax renewal is an investment in our own local economy. Since 2015, approximately $200 million has been locally invested in construction. And then here you can see where the surtax renewal program is going to allocate their funds for the next 6 years. Okay, we're still making positive strides. The projected health insurance trust fund shortfall was 25.6 million, or was projected to be 25.6 million by December 31st, 2021. Today, the projected shortfall is 9.6 million. Although we have more hard work to do, this is really a significant improvement. And so here's what we did. The board contributed 4.7 million in recurring funds, as well as a one-time infusion of $5 million into the trust fund. We implemented design changes that were projected to deliver $5.8 million increase in our trust fund, and we increased premiums on the existing health plan that is projected to increase revenue by 1.7 million. And we also provided a network plan option with no premium increase. Again, the revenue and the savings are estimates, and these changes, with exception of the 5 million infusion, went into effect this January, the beginning of the calendar year. We look forward to our new consultants' updated projections and recommendations for further success. Yet another good news story, the district received 15 million in one-time federal funds to assist with opening schools. The purpose of these federal funds is to open schools safely, reduce any gap in education, and maintain workforce stability. We currently expense and committed a little more than half of our allocation at 54%, and these funds are available for use until September 30th, 2022. BPS allocated funds to meet the 4 focus priority areas that you see on the slide. And again, these are one-time funds and should not align with recurring costs as a rule. Although they can be used to maintain workforce stability to get through the pandemic, we cannot become dependent on these funds in the out years. So although the 15 million in ESSER assisted greatly, it is not enough to fully cover all of our COVID-19 expenses to date. We are tackling 7.3 million in additional costs and 2.9 million in estimated budget loss. And please remember that a budget is based on estimated revenue and is not money in the bank. Lost revenue hurts our buying power and ability to cover estimated expenditures. So now we'll look forward into the next year and tell you what we know as we prepare for challenges in the out years. Our FEFP funding is based primarily on FTE enrollment. One FTE is one full-time student that is enrolled in our schools the entire year. Over the last 4 years, you can see that we experienced enrollment decline in the district as charter and scholarship and other options continue to grow. When you look at 2020-21, you can see that's where we were held harmless. That was our projections last year for this year, and that's where we were funded. When you look at 2021-22, that is our current projections. The state has asked the districts to continue to adjust and modify enrollment projections throughout the legislative session in order to publish a state budget with the best possible enrollment estimate. And then you can see here, worst case, based on the reduction of enrollment, we could have a revenue loss up to $20 million. This slide is a picture of the last slide, and I like pictures better than numbers. So you can see the significant dip we took this year, and at at the same time, you can see charters and scholarship remain or appear to remain steady. So there's a lot going on in this slide. This slide depicts how the drop in enrollment impacts revenue. In 2020-21, hold harmless allowed BPS to keep the entirety of estimated per student funding even when our actual enrollment was down. The hold harmless enabled us to get through a turbulent year. That said, lawmakers intend to align the per student funding to actual enrollment next year. That's where you see the red line, reducing our budget revenue. Like we found ourselves in the last couple of years, we will look into the budget for efficiencies and prepare for considerable cuts if necessary. We are optimistic that our enrollment will recover in the next 2 years, and we'll keep that in mind. We'll keep the long game in mind as we prepare for next year's budget. Okay, so this is a slide that kind of shows you how one FTE is allocated. This slide, you can see that approximately 40% of an FTE pays for the average teacher salary, and the other 60% is invested in fixed operating expenses. We can reduce a classroom teacher allocation, but we cannot reduce all the support around delivering delivering a world-class education. When we reduce an allocation, we still need all the school-based staffing, our transportation, our utilities, our maintenance to support our schools. So this slide is an example to try to kind of bring this home. This slide walks us through a reduction of a classroom teacher allocation. And then one of the things that we have to assume on this is when we don't have neat sets of 18, 20, 22 students that decide not to enroll, especially in a certain school or a certain grade. So, a reduction of 20 students doesn't necessarily mean the reduction of a classroom teacher allocation. So I just want to kind of make that clear that that part makes it difficult. But for this example, we have a budget of $768,000 for 100 students. And then in this example, you take a look and you see if we lose one student in enrollment, the district now has a shortfall of the 7,679. If we lose 10 students, we have a larger shortfall that we still have to make up because we still have those expenses. If we lose 20 children and they all happen to be in the same school in the same grade, we could have a classroom teacher allocation reduction, and then that would partially offset the cost or the expenses that we still have to pay, and then you can go down 40, 60, 80. When you get to 100 students, you can see that out of $768,000 budget, we still have a $460,000 bill, or now we have a shortfall. So again, aligning staffing with enrollment makes up only 40% of the projected loss. So those last two slides were meant to hone in on that point. Hopefully we're able to do that. So 2021 budget challenges. This slide highlights our current budget challenges. We are very aware of the teacher salary allocation and now the minimum wage compression. And then although that we make considerable adjustments, we must contend with rising healthcare costs. These challenges will continue into FY21-22, and the state budget remains uncertain. timing of the legislature does not align well with our budget planning cycle and forces districts to make decisions that impact the next school year without a clear picture of what our budget will be. What we know is 2022 will be challenging, and all the districts and the Department of Education, Florida Department of Education, are working to predict enrollment trend for next year and beyond. In addition to potential reduced budget, we also have potential recurring costs of $9 million and non-recurring costs of $17 million. So when we look at FY23 and beyond, you can see we still have continued increases in FRS, textbook adoption, this time in math, rising healthcare costs, and we still have questions on enrollment. Hopefully that will be at the new normal. And on the other side, you see that we have estimated increases in minimum wage, and this isn't cumulative. This is each year we'll have additional amounts that we're going to have to find recurring funds for. The numbers don't get significant until we get to FY25, but this is something that we need to plan for and prepare for as we move ahead to try to avoid compression issues. So next steps and preparations. Part of our annual process is always digging for efficiencies and savings. Like we found ourselves in the last several years, we'll be faced in the same situation of taking a hard look at potential trade-offs, efficiencies, and budget reductions. Dr. Theddy and I are meeting and working with Cabinet to evaluate requirements, our return on investments, and ensure that we are aligned with our district priorities. And as we prepare for the next year's budget, we will stand fast on our district priorities. And so here's a glimpse of Governor DeSantis' budget, if you haven't seen it already. It is a very optimistic budget. It serves, but I think it's still important because it serves as a guide to his fiscal priorities. And it's reasonable to believe that the legislature will do what they can to try to meet some of his priorities and his initiatives, and when they create the budget, they will be looking at those. So I think it's a great guide. However, the legislature knows that they have a lack of revenue to fund the governor's budget right now. So, you know, we could see some things. And, you know, the other issue is education is a big chunk of our general revenue funds. So there's a lot of things that we don't know. However, we keep on working towards understanding where we're going, and we're watching the legislature every day to see what they're looking at, and we're also checking out to see if our how the Florida's revenue is doing. Last month, it was $400 million above the new projections, which is very good, and it was also above last year's sales revenue. So that was actually pretty amazing. So, you know, Florida, we'll see what's going on, but there's a lot of people trying to figure out where we're going to land, and I don't think anybody knows that answer right now. And then here's our timeline for budget adoption. And Dr. Mullins, did you have any comments that you wanted to make?
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. You know, I think there's definitely some highlights to come back around through where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. It shouldn't fall void on us what we've been able to do what the board has been able to do for the employees of Brevard Public Schools in relation to our healthcare plan. Because we know a year ago, the challenges we faced were steep, to say the least. I'm pleased of the work that this board committed to, both financially, but also in cooperation with our unions to make some considerable changes to our healthcare plan. The reality is I've got to emphasize this because it is a reality known nowhere else. Our employees, for the 7th year in a row, were offered an opportunity to maintain health care with no premium increases. That is as unprecedented, from my understanding, as, quite frankly, the pandemic has been. So we're working hard to bring financial stability to the healthcare plan while also being considerate and thoughtful for our employees and so on. Another highlight I want to make in response to ESSER, that the ESSER or CARES Act, it's got a lot, we call it fondly within BPS ESSER number 1. There is indication ESSER number 2, which was approved by the president, the former administration, the president of the United States, formally on December 27th. A lot of folks have asked, what are we doing with those funds? Well, we can't answer that question. We couldn't provide any information this afternoon because we've not heard anything from the Florida Department of Education to date, either of what our allocation may look like or be, or what the criteria is that we'll be able to spend it. We believe it's going to align with ESSER number 1, but I can't provide you information we haven't received yet. So we're staying close to that as well, but haven't received any indication. But on the slide where we talked about ESSER, where we have expended or encumbered 54% or $8.1 million, I don't want it to be lost that every dollar of the $15 million is obligated. It's built into our plan. It's been presented to the DOE. It's been approved, but we can't draw against it until we expend it. So those funds are obligated through the end of this school year and in the next school year, in anticipation of needing to provide all of those things that were identified, from PPE to extended academic services and ESE supports and workforce support and that sort of thing. So I wanted to highlight that to the board because I know that has come up in questions by our local delegation. How is it we've only, previously it was reported that we had only expended 20%. Well, that doesn't really reflect the rate of expenditure and encumbrance. We can't expend what isn't provided, but to date, or at least as of last week, it's about 54% or a little over half of our allocation of those funds. I might be beating the board to some questions later on. So if you're wondering where I'm going, I picked out some things. If you think back to the slide of the additional COVID expenses, there were some eyebrow raising figures and amounts on there. Not the least of which is unemployment. So you saw on a previous slide we had no layoffs and no furloughs. That is true. Well, then you have got to ask, well, if we had no layoffs, then how can we have unemployment claims? Well, we shouldn't have any. But if you followed the news, the state is experiencing a significant rise in unemployment claims across the state and across all school districts because some checks and balances of submissions for unemployment haven't been in place and payouts to unemployment have been made that are erroneous. And, even to include some identity theft issues that we're working through. But I can assure you, Dr. Theddy, Mr. Langdorf are very aware of that and monitoring it. We're in communication with the state to try and mitigate and manage those claims and potential in the reporting of inappropriate claims. We're working with our employees, and in some cases they didn't even know that a claim had been filed with their information. So we're working to overcome that, but there's no assurance right now that we're going to be reimbursed for those unemployment claims. I know the board understands, our entire funding as a school district is directly dependent on enrollment. I mean, it all comes down to the students you have enrolled. And I appreciate the depiction and the explanation of, you know, how that fluctuates, how we've got to manage and leverage and work to maintain programs and opportunities while also meeting our fiscal responsibilities. Brevard Public Schools has a track record of incredible accuracy with our projections over the last many years. I mean, to the point that we have other districts contact us and say, how do you do it so well? But I got to tell you, everything is thrown out the window this year. It has been the biggest challenge our team has faced. Everybody has been around the table trying to understand and navigate what that looks like. Fortunately, the legislature recognizes it. The DOE has literally sent us 9 different projection models. Did I get that right? 9. And at the end of the day, they say, good luck. Let us know what you think. So they understand. The good news is they understand the challenge that we're in. The legislature also recognizes that they've extended the opportunity for us to continue to evaluate projections into the coming weeks and provide updates. Because I'm going to give you Mark Mullen's oversimplified reality of enrollment. If we underproject our enrollment, we're not guaranteed to get full funding for the FTE once we turn in our true enrollment. So the $7,680, if we underproject and we have 100 more kids, we aren't guaranteed we'll get the full $7,680. But if we overproject and we come in low, we're going to be obligated to pay back the $7,680. So we work so hard to try and get spot on so that we maximize our funding. The team is coming back around it here in the next couple of weeks to work through projections again. There's been a lot of conversation around the state. I had a conversation with Mrs. Jenkins a week or so ago about our under projection, and she was asking, who are those kids? How do we account for the 3,700, almost 3,800 students? And I have laid out to the House Appropriations Committee exactly who they are. Those are not all missing students. Almost 1,400 of them are new home education students, more than we had last year. We had 100 more students go to private school this year than we've had in the past. We've had other there's been lots of other educational options and opportunities arise for families that they've taken advantage of. Interesting, we had over 700 fewer kindergarten first graders enrolled this year. Normally that's about 5,000 kindergartners. We're way down this year. Parents selected what's fondly been called, they red-shirted their first year enrollment kid in school. So we had 700 fewer kids come in just for kindergarten and pre-K. We lost I shouldn't say we lost. We had over 300 fewer students come to us this year that normally come to us from out of country. I was surprised at how many students we have come to us from out of country, over 500 typically. Not a surprise because of the restrictions on travel over the summer and going into this school year. So that begins to put into perspective, where are those 3,800 students? Some of them we know because they were with us last year, and we know exactly who they are and where they're at this year. That helps us follow up with them and reintroduce those families to our school system in the coming year. But the other challenge is we don't know who some of them are because they're first-time enrollees, but we know where to go looking and we know where to target our efforts. So that will be a significant effort in the coming weeks, months, into next school year. Mr. Brune is working to develop a marketing plan to our community, to our families, reintroducing kids who we know left for this school year to the school system, to their local school, supporting our local schools for contacting their communities to encourage enrollment back into our schools, as well as targeting specific areas across our district where we know we've experienced additional loss of enrollment. So we'll be providing more information to the board as we develop further what that plan looks like. Mr. Bruin's been working on that for a couple, 3 weeks now. Been talking with cabinet and really targeting what does that look like as we move forward, not the least of which we're calling it, I think it's pre-K, kindergarten, first grade roundup. So I don't know, staff may get a cowboy hat and a lasso, whatever that is. Put it on me to make a public service announcement, whatever it takes. We want our kids back. We are ready for our kids, and I think we've demonstrated that we can support our children and our families safely in our schools across the district, and we will continue our commitment and dedication to keeping kids safe as we move forward. FRS increase. I believe we're going into about the 4th year, not as significant into the millions of dollars, but last year it was about $5 million. This year, it looks like it's going to be every bit of another little over $2 million going into next year. I think the year before it was a little less than $1 million. That seems to be it's becoming a expense increase we have to continue to budget for and be prepared for. So the governor has reflected it in his budget. The Senate has validated that in early conversations. So, although that is not set in stone because budget hasn't been released, there's very strong indications that expense is going to roll into next year. And I'll close and with 2 things. One is I just lost one. It was probably going to be my most profound moment. I know. I don't know. Well, we're living and breathing it. It'll come back to me at an inopportune time, no doubt. But I will close with this. If I sent to the board several weeks ago now, our local economic development commission did a projection of Brevard County, an economic forecast of Brevard County, and it was very encouraging. I encourage our public to go to the EDC website, view the presentation. If I remember correctly, Brevard has the 2nd lowest unemployment rate in the state of Florida. It's less than 7%. If I remember correctly, that was probably a month or 6 weeks ago. That's something to be encouraged about because there's double-digit unemployment in counties across the state and other places. So although we see around us the growth that we're experiencing, we have Brevard has done an amazing job diversifying its workforce from high tech to manufacturing to all types of industries in response to the closure of the shuttle program. Who would have thought 10 years after the shuttle program closed, we'd be launching a rocket a week, but that's the pace that we've set. So there's lots to be optimistic about. It's going to take us time to fully recover our employment. It's going to be a balance of how do we leverage our recurring dollars? How do we leverage our non-recurring dollars to meet the gaps that are there's going to be gap next year. But I trust the board and our community is encouraged by our steps a year ago when we didn't know as much as we do today, but we still don't know, we still are a lot of unknowns today, that we will work as diligently as we did a year ago to prepare for this difficult year as we prepare for the next couple, 3 difficult years moving ahead. And of course, we'll keep the board apprised and our community informed as we work through those and do everything, we protect our exceptional academic and learning opportunities for kids. We've got to do what we can, sustain our workforce. They're the ones who are making the difference in our kids' lives and across our school. We've got to continue to address our fiscal responsibilities, not just this year, but in years out, and prepare for the future. So I know that was a lot more added on to but I couldn't miss the opportunity to highlight some of the things. We're certainly welcome to any questions the board may have or questions to dig in a little deeper.
Board members have questions for Ms. Lisinski or Dr. Mullins? Ms. Campbell, you have a questioning look on your face?
Thank you, Ms. Lisinski and Dr. Mullins, for giving us this information. I know you hate to give us presentations that are full of I don't know and we don't know and we don't know, but that's where we are in Florida. It's where we are pretty much every year, even without COVID, because of the timing of the budget cycle and the legislature and all that. Just when we're looking at our FTE challenges, and I didn't know that about VBS being so accurate, and kudos to our team, because I know the digging down into the numbers that they do every year that makes us be so accurate each year. For the state, when we're giving these projections, and you said that the legislature is asking us to give updated, and I'm assuming that's coming from our count that we just completed, or we are in the process of completing. It was last week or the week before was our second.
Yeah, last week we submitted these numbers that you see on the bottom.
So they're getting the most accurate. And of course, by the time we get to the end of session, even those will be outdated because we're continuing to have students in and out, mostly in, ever since the beginning of the year. But just, thinking at the big picture, if the legislature makes their budget like they do in normal years, based off of all our projections from the 67 counties, and even if they use the governor's per student funding, which is an increase, a pretty good sized one as the years go, even just since I've been, doing this, it's a pretty good increase. But if they use the numbers that are going to be lower and they set that, it's a fixed pot of money though, once they set it, correct?
Correct.
So if everybody in general in Florida, if we all have an increase, which we're really anticipating, and they've set it on our projected numbers, which are going to be low, then we're all losing, correct? Every district, even if we have growth, it's going to end up really being a lower per student funding, because once the legislature fixes that pot of money,
right, they'll have to find money above that. You're
right.
Yes.
So really, in reality, what it does is it gives us fewer dollars per student by the time it gets all shuffled around, correct? Am I thinking about that correctly?
What I would add to that is that once this, I don't have the governor's budget with me, I apologize.
Right.
And I don't know what number he used to start with. He may have still been using our projection, the second calc.
Okay.
And if he was, that's okay. Because typically what they'll do is they'll decide how big our budget's going to be, and then they'll divide it up by the number of kids to make that happen. So the payout per kid would actually increase, rather than them holding us to that and then harming us.
Okay.
So they will set the state budget as, this is how much we're going to pay, this is how much you're going to earn on your own. So that would actually play in our favor. As far as our projections coming in statewide lower against what he's giving us, then yes, you're right. That would equate to a decrease. And again, this is a bunch of we don't knows, quite frankly. And I wish I had brought that, but I would guess he was using our projection numbers, so he was still anticipating the state will have money to put aside for education. And of course, as Ms. Lisinski and I think Dr. Mullins have both said, that budget's not realistic as far as the legislature is concerned. It's not realistic.
Right, and they've expressed on both sides that they're not anticipating to. It's kind of the governor presented his budget, and the legislature said that's nice, and moved on. But I just know that for the few people at home who may be watching it, it's just such a complicated process. It's just not as simple as how many kids do you have? Here's the dollars, because when it all shuffles out, the growth and the shrinking in district by district or across the whole entire state, it makes the bottom, the end number, not the same as what the beginning number is per student. On the slides about the healthcare, I think that the top of the slide said what we know 2022 will be challenging, and there was recurring costs and non-recurring costs. And you did a great job explaining it over on the right, as far as the recurring is contributions, right, from employees or from or premiums, right? But the non-recurring costs, it's listed there, $7 million one-time contribution to meet reserve requirements. But when we look at the healthcare fund, how are we categorizing what's recurring and non-recurring? Because really, if it's continuing to go up, really it's a recurring problem, correct? Or is some of that the higher expenses we're paying this year because of COVID? Because I know that we've had a bigger loss because of the COVID claims and all the testing and everything that has to come out of our fund.
Ms. Lisinski, I'll try and cover
Okay.
that one. So we're working with our new consultant, Lockton, to reevaluate our projections and our fund balance for the health insurance. And I asked them, I said, which is a different approach than our prior consultant took, and you're very aware as, sitting on SIAC. Our former consultant included in the projection both the recurring increase in expenses and the trust fund shortfall. So for the benefit of the viewing audience, we are required to maintain 60 days of expenditures in reserve in our health insurance trust fund, in addition to meeting our monthly expenses. We've been in a situation in the last couple, 3 years where our expenses are continuing to exceed our revenues. So our reserve is being expended down because there was no new revenue going in until this year. So we made as much of a correction this year, like we explained, as we could. And I asked our new consultant a couple weeks ago, I said, I'd like us to understand the situation a little differently. Our health expenses go up by some trend over time every year. And we must maintain this reserve balance. If we get our reserve to where it is, it must be, it's about $12 million. We have about $6 million of medical expenditures a month. If we get our reserve to 12 million and we've either increased our revenue or reduced our expenses to equal out, then we don't spend our reserve, and we then only have to maintain and sustain our increased expenses over time. And as we've done some rough estimates before Lockton has put their actuarists to the task, it looks like we're somewhere over the last 2 to 4 years trending a 4 to 6% increase in medical expenses a year. That's about $3.5 million a year. So if we get our reserve up to where it needs to be and we tackle annually the cost of increase in expenses by any number of a few things like we did this year, then we don't have to keep infusing one-time money. We just continue to address the recurring increased cost of healthcare. So what you see is a very, very early projection of what it would take to take care of both of those things. Get the reserve up to 12 million and take care of the recurring shortfall through the end of next fiscal year. To add to the challenge of it, our health insurance fiscal year is January 1 to December 30th, but our district's fiscal year is July 1. So they're offset by 6 months. So it gets a little awkward, okay, when we fund and when we put money in, and even when our employees make additional contributions and that sort of thing. So the figures you saw on the later slide about the costs don't match that 9.6 million earlier because that was through January. We're trying to project through next fiscal year as a district. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. So basically, the non-recurring cost is the getting the balance of the funds up to that 2-month standard, and the recurring is what we need to have in there to keep it going.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Based on early
I won't hold you to it.
projections.
I won't hold you to it.
And not verified by our consultant.
Anybody else have questions? Ms. Jenkins?
Yeah, I have one question with a couple of sub-questions underneath it. So the slide that is talking about the additional COVID-19 expenses not funded through ESSER, there is a line of increased COVID-related healthcare costs at $2.1 million. So my question is, can you define for anyone who might be listening, what exactly does that mean? How much of that is potentially staff members going to get a COVID test at a non-free site? How much is that probably going towards actually our staff needing medical help due to the effects of COVID?
You want me to take that one too?
I think I know the answer, but I'll let you
Okay.
take it.
No, go ahead.
I believe the majority of the funding, the 2.1, is medical attention needed by our employees.
So, yes, that is correct. And that is only for the first half of this fiscal year. It may have grown. That is only through December 31st. So it represents any one of our insureds. We insure more than just our own employees. We have over 11,000 people insured on our plan. That represents anyone who received treatment, care, a test, not at a free clinic kind of thing, but obviously some extensive medical care and treatment, who tested positive for COVID, so they were treated for COVID and COVID-related symptoms. That's not to suggest that individuals may not have had some pre-existing chronic conditions that were exacerbated by COVID, but based on Cigna's reporting to us, and I see the true master of it is coming through the magical door in the back, Dr. Theddy, but that represents that employees or insured individuals on our plan through first semester. Dr. Theddy, thumbs up in the middle or 2 thumbs up? Wow, I don't get that very often.
Thank you. And so the reason I asked that question, I assumed that was the answer, but I just wanted to get confirmation there. But I think it's really important for us to recognize that science has told us that most of these people who have been infected by COVID or have struggled may struggle along the way. So this is a significant hit to our healthcare that we probably potentially would not have seen otherwise. And it's not something that's just going to go away when vaccines become available. So we're going to likely see a giant increase in our healthcare costs as the years continue.
And that's a good, Ms. Jenkins, that's a good point. The projections we provided make no adjustment for COVID-related increased costs. It's based on past trend, which only includes 6-ish months of COVID-related care. So you're correct. It'll have to be reprojected to take that into account.
Is that it, Ms. Jenkins?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Mr. Susan, questions, comments?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of other things that are coming in the healthcare costs too, besides just the increase in COVID costs, because every time somebody hits the ICU, it costs us $100,000. Every time somebody's been tested positive for COVID and they have a baby, it has to go into 2 weeks of ICU. There's the after-related effects and why all of our athletic sports institutions are doing hard EKGs afterwards, because they're seeing stuff there. You're 100% right. And one of the other pieces that we're looking at is an increased cost in surgeries and things that people are putting off. So we're going to see probably a reduction in cost in those areas to where it's going to offset some of the COVID stuff. But the problem is that once all those people start coming back and they start making those appointments, the knee surgeries, the back surgeries and all that, with our aging population, that's going to be a significant hit to our healthcare, because it's not being happening right now. So you're going to see a couple of things, but you're 100% right, Ms. Jenkins. They're seeing the long-term effects of what this is doing in some people, not everybody, but some people, and we need to be prepared for it. I did want to talk to your pre-K and kindergarten. My son did not get enrolled because of COVID, because we were having the baby, and because of what I just said with the COVID and going into ICU. There is a massive amount of kindergartens or some pre-Ks coming. And I think that our legislators, when we're in conversations with them, need to understand when somebody's standing up there and they say, well, you don't have 3,000 people inside of your school that you normally have. Well, we're going to have probably 700 more kindergartners, as Dr. Mullins has said. If you divide that by 18, that's how many teachers are going to be needed for that, and how many we're going to be adjusting. So it's going to be very difficult. So a lot of the people up there in Capitol Hill are talking about our budgets and stuff like that moving forward. They need to have that. And in talking to some of the lobbyists that are in Tallahassee, there's a lot of talk wrapped around that is what's going to keep us afloat so that they don't ding us as bad as they normally would, is because of that fear of who's coming. I did have a question. I did want to say this. Economic forecasts for Brevard County is the only county, according to the Chamber of Commerce for the state of Florida, that will not see an economic recession in the next 20 years. So if you guys drive over to Kissimmee, and it's one of the saddest things, you'll see the old hotel motels that are now turned into, you know, spray painted places. And I mean, their unemployment rate's very, very high. We're very blessed inside this county for what we have, but I did want to tell you that not only do we have the second or the first lowest, it's also the best economic forecast of any county in the state of Florida, which is awesome. But I did want to get back to this task, this unemployment, because I'm really upset about it, Dr. Mullins. If you can explain to me how the unemployment cost process works. And I know the answer, but I kind of want to go through this. So we get told from the state we owe this much. Go through that for me.
So, yeah, Dr. Theddy, you're going to have to come up and save me on this one. We receive quarterly reports from the state on our contribution or share to unemployment. Am I right so far? And then we get a list of what the claims are based upon, and then we have to do our detective work to figure out who, what, why, when, and where. I'll let Dr. Theddy fill it. There was a lot of gaps there, so take it away.
Actually, that was a great summary. We do get quarterly, starting with January to March, and then April to June, and so on. Our first quarter last year, 2020, it was what we would expect, about $5,600. The second quarter increased to $286,000, of which we had to pay half, because at that point it became recognized that there might potentially be a problem. Third quarter's expenses or bill was, I want to say, somewhere around $400,000, and again, we paid half of that. We've contested each of the unemployment claims. We have found that some of our employees, you know, that they did not submit them, that somebody else submitted them for them. It's a long process. It's not a quick process. So that's what we're working on. We do not have fourth quarter yet. So everything that we have that you saw on that slide is an estimate for fourth quarter of 2020 and then the first 2 quarters of 2021. So we don't have any of that information yet. But I would suspect it'll be very similar to what we saw in quarters 2 and 3 of 2020.
Dr. Theddy, just so that I can get the process right, because you remember when you told me about this, I got really fired up the first time you told me. If I'm an individual that wants to apply for unemployment, do I do that through the school district or do I do that through the state?
You do not do that through the school district.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that the state has had their entire process has been hacked, for a better word, by individuals who are taking advantage of it. And we have to pay our half, which isn't even a true statement because they hacked it. Our people aren't even writing that. We have to pay because they were the individuals that didn't have a sound system. Is that kind of the correct terminology here?
Normally, we wouldn't pay half. Normally, we would pay the entire unemployment bill. And there's a certification process. Some things changed with COVID this year at the state level related to the certification and related to your weekly certifications that you're looking for employment. That all changed and was waived with COVID. And as you know from watching news reports, there were issues with the unemployment process. As far as Brevard Public Schools is concerned, you know, when we have to pay the bill, we pay the bill. We contest the results. We are working with our employees. We, for quarters 2 and quarter 3, sent out information to our employees so we could gather if they had applied for it, because some of them did and legitimately did apply for and receive unemployment. Others didn't apply, and so that was noticed to them that somebody had applied. It's just a lengthy process, Mr. Susan, for us and for the state to contest each of those claims.
And so is the state put together, because you said 280, 400, and we still don't have the next 2 quarters coming. Sounds to me, because that's $340,000 that we had to pay in, right? Have they put a task force together? What have they done to stop these criminals from doing this?
I can't speak to what the state has done, but I can find out for you.
No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you guys, it just seems like, okay, you guys pay half, and I have not heard a single thing coming out of Tallahassee about if we're getting hit like this, then the rest of the state's getting hit. There's got to be millions of dollars sitting there going out, and it just keeps happening. So if they haven't stopped it after the 280, they didn't stop it after the 400, now they're going to keep going. And I mean, what's our next bill going to be, 600? We're going to pay 300, then 400,000, then, I mean, at what point do you just stop and put a system in place? I mean, I don't know. Dr. Thady, I'm sorry. I got fired up the first time we talked about this on the phone and I said I'd leave it alone. But I'm just really mad right now because I don't want to continue to pay because there's a system that's been hit up in Tallahassee and we're having to do it. Especially, I mean, look at how many computers is that? How many playgrounds is that? How many is all that stuff? And we're just paying it out because some other guys are taking it from us. And that's not right. So I'm not yelling at you. I'm just fired up. My daughter always says that. She's like, Dad, you're yelling at me. I'm like, no, I'm fired up and I'm just telling you right now what I'm feeling. So,
Not that it's any consolation for us or anyone else, but this is not a Brevard
Right.
unique problem. This
Right.
is a statewide problem. Ms. Lisinski has been on conference calls with her colleagues in other parts of the state. It's the same issue in other parts. I can tell you that Mark Langdorf's office, who handles unemployment, is working through each of these because it is really important to us to make sure that we are only paying what we're supposed to pay. However, like I said, it's a lengthy process. It's not one that I'll have an answer to in the short term.
I mean, think about it. We're the school boards, then there's the cities, the municipalities, the counties, I mean, it's got to be out of control. And I haven't heard one thing. I haven't heard any task force. I haven't heard anything about this. All right, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that the public understands that we are footing the bill for a significant unemployment and we need some help. And I'm going to call on our legislators to start doing something. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just tag off of that real quick for a clarifying question from Dr. Thady? I believe you said this to me in a meeting, or correct me if I'm wrong here, but excuse me, that fee that we're paying, even if we contest it, we don't get that money back, correct? It comes back as a credit?
I can't say that we didn't talk about that. I don't know what happens once we contest it.
Okay.
Because this is an unusual process. This is something brand new. We had, like I said, our first quarter of last year was $5,600, which is about what we would expect. What happened second and third quarter and what we anticipate to happen fourth quarter and first and second of this year is a totally different process. So what we will get back, I would have to get back to you, and I will.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that,
I asked the same question when I saw this number. I was blown away about why it's so high that we're paying for unemployment when we haven't let anybody go. So here's my question. So what happens if when you do your research and we do see somebody who's currently working for us and they file too? Is there any penalty for somebody?
we fire
like
them?
that?
I think we do.
So we're not finding, I think what you're asking is, are we having people file when they really don't qualify? And that's not 100% of what we found.
Oh, that's good to know.
What we have found is that if people did apply, they were applying legitimately for a lot of different reasons. Some, it could be related to a second job that they have, but we're their primary job. So their second job potentially could have, they could have been out of that second job for a period of time last year. And so they applied for unemployment, and through whatever process that is through the state, they ended up on our list. The other thing that we have found has happened is that some people have had unemployment applied for in their names, and they did not apply at all. And then they have to go through a process to protect their identities.
So, the whole system, when this all happened with the state, we know it wasn't a crack system. There were people who couldn't apply, and it went on for months. Obviously, this looks like this has not been fixed, and it's just getting worse. So I agree with you,
Shut
Mr.
it down.
Sousa, and this is unconscionable because this is the school's money.
I mean, okay, gonna follow that up.
I'll add, and I don't want to dismiss the impact on people too. Dr. Thedy has made me aware of when we start asking our employees about why a claim was filed in their name, they call us just in tears.
It's very scary for our employees.
Beside themselves, what is going on? Why did this happen? I didn't do this. So, it's taking an emotional toll on some of our folks as well, and that's concerning for us too. So we're not only trying to triage what happened and why it happened, but also to tend to the employee who is distraught, like, what does this mean? Who's going to come after me? And all of those kind of things. So we're, kudos to Dr. Thedy and her team for being responsive to a whole unforeseen host of challenges that they faced related to it.
Now I'm really mad. Like, you think about somebody being hurt like that. How is this rated? Is it rated that the entire state just takes it per capita on us, or is it that we literally are showing in their books $400,000, or is it that the amount that they've been hacked up in Tallahassee is X and they're dividing that among the municipalities? Does anybody know? Is it like a direct number? They say these people, do they give us a report?
Yes, it's by individual, it's by amount. So it's not prorated based on other counties, it's our people, it's their numbers, their amounts.
And it takes them 2 quarters, 6 months to give us the names of the individuals that applied and received the unemployment?
No, we have quarters 1, 2, and 3 of last year. We just haven't received quarter 4 last year of last year, which would be October to December, and we have not been through. We are just estimating. This number that you see on the slide estimates calendar year 2021, the first 2 quarters, and it estimates the 4th quarter of calendar year 2020. We should be getting that fourth quarter anytime now.
But is there a system in place that so-and-so has applied for unemployment?
We know when we get the information.
The quarterly appointment. So they've already received the money, it's gone through the system for 3 months, and then we get a bill saying these people are the ones that filed, but there's no pre-check, like, hey, did these people file for unemployment? There's no checks and balances inside the system like that we know of?
Not that I'm aware of, but I will find out.
No, you don't have to find out, Dr. Theddy. I'm going to get some answers quick on some other stuff. I'm fired up.
There used to be checks and balances in the system, and what happened was when they had so much influx into the unemployment system in Florida, their solution to be able to handle that influx
It was just take the checks
was
and
to
balances.
take away the checks and balances so people could actually get their unemployment. So it was done to try to help people, but it created an enormous mess.
Pay now, ask questions later.
Yes. So, Dr. Theddy, I don't really want to stir Mr. Susan up anymore because he's stirred up enough, but I have to ask this question because I think it's important to ask. So I know in my businesses, the percentage of unemployment tax that I pay for my employees is based on the number of employees who have filed unemployment claims under my business. Are we seeing, does the same thing happen with the school district, that the more people, they adjust the percentage of unemployment tax that we have to pay based on the claims?
I would have to get you that answer. I don't have it offhand unless Ms. Lisinski does.
No, I can tell you.
I'd have to get that for you.
Not only does unemployment increase, your workers' comp increases,
Yeah.
your workers' comp claims, your property increases. Absolutely. It's the same as all the other pieces that are put into insurance. It increases.
So we are probably paying additional unemployment tax as a result of the additional claims, which would be another area that we could potentially try to scrape back some of our dollars. If they have adjusted, they need to correct that adjustment, I would think. And then my other question is it typical for someone who has a second job and loses their second job to be paid unemployment from their primary job where they're still working?
So in talking with Mark Langdorf about that, because I asked that same question, we are the primary employer, so it comes back to us, and he explained the process to me on how that all works, but I cannot reiterate it right here, or repeat it right here with the clarity that he can. I will send that to you, though.
Because that would also increase our percentage of unemployment tax that we have to pay when it has nothing to do with our employment. Like
That's true.
We've been responsible to keep these people employed, and now it really is costing us enormously.
It is.
Okay. Thank you.
I have one more question. Sorry. So we are talking about the impact of our employees that this was filed fraudulently. So are we hand-holding those employees? Are we following up with them to see how that process is going for them? Or are we just kind of letting them know and kind of just telling them where to go?
So, initially, when we first heard about it, we didn't know what was going on, and I think that was some of the conversations that you all are remembering. We didn't know if people were applying without cause or what was happening. And the one thing that was always in the back of my mind is that it was fraud not on the part of our employee committing fraud, but fraud on the part of somebody committing it against our employee. So Dr. Green and Mr. Langdorf worked together in those first 2 quarters to send out information to employees and to let them know what they needed to do. But as far as contesting the unemployment, that comes down to us. They don't have to do that. We just needed to collect the data that it wasn't them that had applied for it, and that's what we found in a lot of cases. As for hand-holding, it's different for every person. For some people, there was one check and they received the check to their home and they said, well, I never applied for this, and they brought us the check. So that was a different situation than somebody who didn't know anything about it, and it became, our notice became their first notice that somebody had potentially gotten their name or their personal information to apply for unemployment.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Dr. Theddy? Any additional questions for Dr. Mullins or Ms. Lisinski?
I just want to, because this is not related to unemployment, yay. But I did want to make the point to the board, because I think it was brought up, I don't know if it was you, Ms. Jenkins, that we're talking about the COVID test, just to clarify, whether you go to EFSC or one of the free sites or to a MedFast or whatever, it's actually not completely free. It's free to the employee, but it's not free to our plan. So if there's a couple of times that my husband and I've had to go through testing. There is an explanation of benefits. It's $100 and however many dollars charged to the plan, but it's not right. When we have people go in to get COVID tests, if you have insurance, even if you go through, all they take is your driver's license, and you think, how do they know my insurance name with my driver's license? But it's connected back to your insurance, correct?
Well, I can't answer that definitively because that has not happened to everybody.
Okay.
When you go to Eastern Florida and you get tested at Eastern Florida, you do not have to provide any kind of insurance information. And I don't know of more than a couple of people that have actually gotten an EOB related to that. So that's something I've marked, right. I have Mark Langdorf working on that. Now, if you do go to an urgent care, a MedFast, one of the other places, and you get tested for COVID, yes, the plan is getting charged. I want to say we're getting charged for the visit and then an amount for the test as well.
Right.
So I think the tests range, depending on where you go, somewhere between $40 and $85. But when you go to Eastern Florida, it's not supposed to be charged against our insurance. Now, if you put your insurance information in, which is one of the options when you go to one of the free sites, it is very possible that they're billing against insurance at that point, but you are not required to put in your insurance information.
Right.
The clinics are different.
Right. Thank you.
Part of that is we're driving them to low-cost centers when it's free for us in multiple places.
Dr.
So
Theddy,
like
don't go too
the
far.
MedFasts and some of our other locations, we want to make it free co-pays and free service because we want to drive them, because had they had that somewhere else, it's 10 times as much. So, just wanted to kind of point that out.
So I was going to ask Ms. Lisinski these couple of questions, but I think it really kind of probably falls more in your wheelhouse. On our additional COVID-19 expenses, we have $1.3 million in COVID leave costs. So how is that cost generated?
So it's not actually a cost as in we're paying something right now. It's paying people as though they were working. They're not taking leave, or if they were out of leave, they're not taking unpaid leave. So it's a delayed cost, for lack of a better way to put it, because we're giving people however many days, and it's up to 10 days. Not necessarily everybody's taking 10 days. Some are taking a couple of days, but they're quarantined for 10 days, so they're maybe teaching from home for the balance of their days if they feel better. So that's just an estimated cost of what that salary value is.
So do we, it's probably a tough number to come to because I know that we've had a severe shortage of subs and we've had a lot of people covering classes, right? Do we also, in addition to these COVID leave costs, do we also have additional substitute costs over and above this leave cost?
We do, because if you think about it, if we have a teacher who's out of the building for a 10-day quarantine because the teacher herself or himself has COVID, or if that individual is out of the building for a 14-day quarantine because they're a contact to a family case, we do have to have somebody in the classroom with the students, even if the teacher is teaching from home during that quarantine period. So yes, there is an increased cost. However, we are running right at 70% fill rate for substitutes. It's a very low fill rate for substitutes. So we're not seeing the same substitute cost you would think we would see given if we were given the same circumstances in a different year. So our sub budget is actually looking okay related to that because we can't find the people. So we end up with principals, assistant principals, literacy coaches, teachers on planning period. We sent out some information about using support staff and how to do that so that they can assist with subbing. We've had priority schools that we've given additional funding to try and get substitutes into their schools. We've tried a variety of different things to get subs in. So I can't call it a one-to-one. I can't say that our sub budget, our costs have increased the way that our costs in our estimated salary costs have increased. But in a perfect world, yes, you would have seen a big increase there.
Okay. And then the other question that I had was, and I know the answer to this, I just want to make sure that our public understands the answer too. On our projected impact of the minimum wage increase, we don't see a significant jump in our costs associated with that until 2025. Why is that?
So right now, the direct employees that we have that are below that $10 are our substitutes, our support staff substitutes and our teacher substitutes, high school diploma and AA degrees. The other people that are counted in that $87,000 for the first year are our contracted services, like for food services, that might be paid lower than that in those AOE staffing and other contracts that we have. When we move into the out years, we are now talking about people who are potentially right now making $13, $14 now by IAs, bus drivers, that in the out years we have to include them. So you see the big increase there when we start to get to $14 and $15 an hour, including all of those classifications of employees. So the first year, this year, it's a fairly small number, but it increases as we go through time. And then I don't believe those numbers account for any of the compression that it creates either.
I will assure you it does not, which
Yes.
presents a whole new challenge.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
You're
And I see that Mr. Langdorf has joined us. Did you want to ask him to address any of the questions, or how would you like to move forward?
I think the unemployment question, I know the unemployment question is one that Mrs. Jenkins asked that he could definitely address related to how that all works. So I will let him come to the podium.
Ms. Jenkins, I'm sorry. Could you tell me what the question was again?
Yeah, absolutely. So I might be mixing this up with something else that was thrown at me, but I believe I was told that the amount of money that we're paying towards that unemployment, if we do contest it and it comes back in our favor, that we don't actually get that money back, that it goes into kind of like a credit balance for us.
That is correct.
Which is a really significant problem because typically a year's worth of claims is about what? Like what would an average year typically be?
We spend probably $50,000 to $60,000 on an average year.
And we're already sitting at $600,000, I believe.
That, yes.
Right. So we're going to take 10 years to gain back the credit of fraudulent unemployment claims. So I think that's really important for everyone to recognize.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
In addition to that, it's going to take a long time for the state to figure out how much is owed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a long time in coming before they figure it out. Frankly, and I remember some of the initial questions were, what is the state doing about it? They did suspend all pre-claim certification, which you mentioned earlier. And so they just started paying everybody. So a lot of what we had were people who had applied. And so we got these large bills. The first billing we got for the second and third quarter didn't come in until October. So there was a long time with a lot of claims that had proceeded on we weren't aware of. As soon as we got that information, we responded immediately, protesting that claim, an appeal of sorts through the unemployment compensation system. And right now, they are so backlogged in making those adjudications that it's going to take them a long time to figure that out.
So realistically, we're probably going to end up with millions of dollars of credit for unemployment claims.
It's possible. Hopefully it won't be that long, but because I have noticed lately what's happening with the state is they are asking us now for the first time starting this past month, they started asking us, before getting the bill whether somebody has applied for unemployment compensation. The difference is we're still not getting determinations from the state on whether they've denied or accepted the claim. So that's a long process.
Thank you, Mr. Langdorf, for
Sure.
coming, running across the campus and getting
No
here.
problem at all. No problem at all.
So what I'm hearing you say is they have some sort of a process in place where they're calling you, so somebody applies, and then they're calling us to say, hey, is this person truly unemployed? But then we don't know, we say yes or no, but then we don't know if they actually went through? Is that the process that I'm hearing you say?
I'll kind of give you how the process works. An employee goes into the Department of Economic Opportunity website and they apply for benefits. From there, the state typically would notify us through that website that a claim has been filed. They give us time to respond to that, and on a typical year, we would respond and say this person should not be eligible and provide the reason for that, or we don't have to respond if it's a typical layoff because they would pay somebody for that. All of that's been suspended, except for they just started doing that as of January. So all the backlog of claims are still going on. They paid people that probably, if they had applied for benefits because they had a part-time job, they weren't aware that of all of that. The state just went and paid everybody. So that's why a lot of those bills are as high as they are at this point.
Okay.
Does that answer your question there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Langdorf.
Earlier, you had asked the question about unemployment tax. I think this is important to understand. Public entities in the state of Florida are not given the same tax as a private enterprise would be. What we pay is dollar for dollar. For every dollar that's paid, we are billed for that dollar. So typically it's less expensive for us than the percentage that an employer would typically, a private employer would have. But this year is the exception because they paid that. And for the first time, my first job with the state was with the unemployment office, by the way. So, you know, who knew? Anyway, the first time in my career working for the state and with the school district, they just sent a report in the October billing saying, you're not responsible for 50% of the bill, so just pay half. So we're given the full cost, told to whack out that other 50% and then pay that. So it's not, what they're not, they are not precise in their billing whatsoever. It's just 50% of the amount.
It sounds like when you don't want to pay your credit card or your hospital bill, and you say, hey, I'll only pay half, right? That's what they're sounding like. But they have put in controls in place going forward from January?
I'm hoping so, because up until the end of the year, they were not asking any questions. They were not saying, tell us about this person who's applied. They started to do that now. So I'm hoping that that's the case. We still have not received any determinations from the state on whether the claim has been denied or accepted. And some of those, because I don't know if you're aware, but there does appear to be some fraud going on throughout the state. And it seems like a rampant problem, actually. We're getting that too, because we're getting a notice that somebody's applied. We check our record, our base of employees, and find out whether they are employed or not. If they're employed, we call them and say, did you apply for unemployment compensation? Most of the time, in fact, 99.9% of the time, those people that are employed had not applied. Somebody had their Social Security number and other things so they could apply. What we do is we go through with them and explain how you could report this to the credit agencies, because we don't know where that Social Security came from. We're just told the claim has been filed. We also give them I can't remember, Ms. Moody, the fraud department up in Tallahassee, we provide that information to them. We send them to the link on the unemployment database, which shows how you can appeal or try to get this stopped immediately. And we kind of do help them. You know, you asked earlier, what are we doing to help? And sometimes those are tough calls, but we do the best we can.
Thank you, Mr. Langdorf. We appreciate that. One additional question. I don't know if you were in transit or if you heard it, but the question was about people who are laid off from a second job being charged to us for unemployment. Is that how things have been done previously?
Well, this is the downfall of having a dollar-to-dollar payment. If we were a private sector employee, this unemployment office can completely cut that off. We are not. So if they are working for us still, we have to, well, through quarterly, and our payroll department does this, we kind of work in tandem on that. We will report that they're still working full-time. If they're laid off from a part-time job, they can receive the unemployment benefits from that part-time job. And what they are required to do every 2 weeks is report their gross wages to the state. The state will then subtract what they're able to receive from that amount based on their earnings. Most of the time, our pay is in excess of what the state would pay, so they would not be eligible. Unfortunately, I just don't know what's happening in this type of situation for those. So it could be that they are drawing unemployment at this point. It's hard to know because we haven't received those determinations.
And if they are drawing unemployment, it's our bill to pay.
It is until they fix this situation. We go in and we, like I say, we respond and we protest the claim saying that this employee is still working 40 hours a week or how many hours a week they work. And so they are aware of that. They should be questioning that and making determinations. Typically, the state would make that determination that yes, they are working, but the wages they're earning are not sufficient so they could get some money. We haven't received any determinations on those claims as of this point.
Thank you.
You bet.
So Moody's the one that's got the fraud department, the Attorney General?
Yes.
So that's one area.
We send them that web page.
It's just funny because, like, they pass legislation to make sure, which I agree with, that we have to go past this in order to go to travel $500, right? And then we get bills for like $680,000, and there's no like red flag, white knight coming in on a horse. I mean, nothing. It's just like, hey, this is going on. And then we've got our employees that are taking these phone calls like, what just happened? I had my entire thing robbed of my life, and now they have to go behind the scenes, and nothing's getting done. I mean, this is garbage. So, all right. I'm done now, Ms. Belford. Thank you for giving me a chance to rant. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Lingdor.
Any additional
Sure.
comments or questions on any of the budget information? No. All right. Thank you all. We
Yes.
appreciate it.
Ms. Belford, if I may, just bring us back. I remembered what I was going to share a while ago. I told you it would, but it was only, and it goes back to enrollment. I just want to remind us where we were at the beginning of the year. 3,800 students at October FTE sounds a lot. I think I've given an explanation as to the students who didn't come and the students who we know left. But I didn't mention a couple of things, where we were in enrollment. If you remember, I presented at the board back in, I think, early September. We were 14,000 students under projection, and we all got like that knot in the pit of our stomach. That was on day one of school. It included kindergartners who don't come but till the third or fourth day of school. Our schools narrowed that number to 5,400 6 days later. That's tremendous work on behalf of our school teams. And then we reduced it even further to 3,800 by October FTE. So I want to do the shout out to our school-based administrators and their teams for the great work that they have done and been doing to address the enrollment concern. They stay vigilant to it. And then finally, I'll close. There are students who we had last year, we don't have this year, and we don't know their whereabouts. There's a total of, right now, 87. It was a high of 114 students. Those are very disconcerting situations for us and for our administrators, and they continue to work with Leading and Learning, the support teams there, student services. I'm pleased we've narrowed that by about 20 or 30 kids from where we were. It is about 47 more than we were last year, but they remain dedicated to trying to connect and follow up with those families to the degree that they send their social worker or law enforcement out to last known addresses and homes and knock on neighbors' doors, because we take seriously the care and provision we provide to our kids and trying to account for every single one of them. So thank you for the extra couple minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. That's good information. All right, that's going to move us into our next order of business today on Brevard After School Financial Overview. Jane Klein, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Leading and Learning, will make the introductions to the presentation.
I thought she was hanging out.
Good afternoon. Another exciting time to talk about financial services in our after-school program. I'm going to give you a little bit of history of Brevard After School and Leading and Learning. So about a year or so ago, Dr. Mullins said we're going to do some shifting, and Brevard After School was coming to Elementary Leading and Learning. So as I was meeting with our directors, I said, okay, we're going to get Brevard Aftercare. Anybody want to add one more thing to their plate? Dr. Ivory said, me. You may regret that now, but she said, me. And she said, I just left the elementary school. I know things that I wish I would have known as a principal about aftercare, and I think we need to dig deep. So as we brought this program part of Elementary Leading and Learning, it is a daily learning. We are learning each and every day new things about the aftercare program, and some things that we have to make switches and changes on, and we're working on that. But Dr. Ivory also is responsible for 10 principals. She supervises 10 principals. She's also in charge of all major discipline for elementary, and also the K-12 reading plan and elementary literacy coaches. So Brevard After School was just an added little bonus to her day, and she has embraced it. She has brought a team together, and a team who didn't feel like they were part of BPS. And that's sad but true. So at this time, Dr. Ivory.
Thank you for the opportunity to give you updates on the Brevard After School program. So our Brevard After School program is a service organization. It's a service. We provide a service for our community. And the service is 3 ways. Through our Brevard After School, also known as BAS, and that's our fee-based program. We provide it for our 21st Century Learning Centers, and that's at 18 of our 28 Title I schools, and that is a supplement to our fee-based programs. And we have an 8-week summer camp program. Brevard After School, again, I said it's our fee-based program. It's our district-operated before-after-school program that is fee-based, and it abides by the generally accepted accounting principles. We treat it as a business. We have our 21st Century Community Learning Centers, and that's based on the ESSA Every Student Succeeds Act. And again, I said that supplements. We do some tutoring with that program, and I'll give you more information on our 21st Century programs, and we have our summer camps. Our 21st Century Community Center, it aligns with our strategic plan of community connections. We have an advisory committee for our 21st Century programs. But we also focus on our mission. We serve students in K through 6th grade, and we provide a safe and healthy before-after-school program. So our mission is to serve students in the school setting, but our BPS mission, but our after-school mission is to serve students in the after-school setting. So I want to talk a little bit about our fee-based offerings. We have about 7 fee-based offerings, including an 8-week summer camp. Our employee limited use offering is for the employee that's at the school site. It's about 8.5 hours max a week they can use for about $8 a week, and of course next year that's going up to $9. And also employees from a different school site that may need to use it for early release Wednesdays. So that is for our limited, I'm sorry, early release days. It's no longer on Wednesdays. And that's our employee limited use fee. We have our full program. That has the potential to raise more revenue or bring in more revenue. But right now, we currently have about 27% of our students about 27% of participants are participating, are choosing the full program. Of course, we have the daily drop-in morning and afternoon. Now, our annual pass gives parents the opportunity to choose any 15 days throughout the school year, and they pay about $250 a year for any 15 days. And then we have our summer camp. So our student ratio is 1 to 25, but it's really 2 employees for that 1 to 25, because our school coordinators are used as a safety monitor, and then our group leaders are responsible for the supervision of the 25 kids. Now, if we have 26 to 50, well, at 26, we may earn another group leader. However, if that parent chooses to keep their student from 2:30 to 3:30 or from 2:30 to 3 o'clock, we would not hire a group leader for 4 hours or 5 hours. So sometimes we would try to use the IA or cafeteria worker to say, would you like to earn maybe 1.5 hours, depending on the time that the kids are in there. So anywhere from 26 to 50 people can be a temporary person, what's called a job 30, where we have an employee at another work group that will earn the work for the 1.5 hours, or we'll just hire a full person if we have up to 40 or 50. Our parents have choices of schedule, and that goes back to what I was talking about our ratio. Our parents may choose anywhere from 2:30 to 3:30 or 2:30 to 3 o'clock, or they may have 2:30 to 6 o'clock. And that's important when I talk to you about the 21st century. We have paid enrichment activities. However, this year, because of COVID, we did not have our vendors come in to offer paid enrichment activities. We take in about 18% per child for the enrichment activities that we do, and they're anywhere from organized sports to, it could be a group coming in and helping our students with coding, and our parents pay for those paid enrichment activities. Now, as far as homework help is concerned, each individual school decides for the BAS program, that's the fee-based program, what type of homework help they give or they offer. Now, I also want to share, now remember that our employees get about 55% discount when they use our program. Our 21st Century Community Learning Centers, that's a component of our ESSA. We are the only entity in Brevard County that has received this grant. Other school districts have received this grant, and in other counties, the Girls and Boys Club, but in our county, Brevard is the only person that receives this grant. It supplements the lack of fees at the schools where we didn't have a high number of students participating in our BAS program. With our 21st Century program, again, I was saying that it was connected to our strategic plan of community connections. Our families agree to participate in this program, and they must keep their kids on the schedule between 2:30 and 5:45. So whereas our BAS program, the parents may decide the schedule. If they participate in our 21st Century program, they agree to keep their kids in until 5:45. We have a student ratio of 1 to 20 for our group leaders, and we have a parent involvement component. Now, as a former school principal, this was my favorite part of having, I had a school that had the 21st Century grant, and I would always connect when we would do parent nights with this parent involvement component. But this year, it kind of has changed, and our parent involvement component is based on cell and mental health activities that we support families. The parent component that we're offering this year is virtual, but we help parents help their students with if they have anxiety about something, or how to talk to their kids if they are having some kind of mental stressors. Tutoring and homework help. In our 21st Century program, we hire teachers from their school to come and provide support to them academically in ELA and math. And our teachers provide academic enrichment as well as tutoring and homework help. And this is a part of the grant. This is one of the deliverables that we offer through this grant. And another favorite part of this grant that I liked as a parent and I liked as a principal were our on-location field trips. So our on-location field trips are also enrichment activities. So we partner with University of Florida Extension Office, and they come in, they help our students with gardening and healthy snacks. In fact, our student gardens compete. And I think Sherwood and Croton, they have won an award for their squash. But that's one of the enrichment activities that we provide for our community with the 21st Century Learning. And they also, our gardens, they donate the food to the Sharing Center. So our 21st Century Learning Centers, we have a staff at Clear Lake. So in addition to their hiring teachers to work after school with their students, they pay 31.25% of the school coordinator's salary. So that's the district pays the other 70%. And they pay the salary of the schools that they are participating in. We have our group leaders are hired at 100% paid for by the grant. Now our Clear Lake staff, we have program development coordinators, and they're the equivalent of like a success coach, and they go into the schools to make sure they are supporting the schools and supporting the coordinators with billing, with success on looking at, is your program growing, or can I help you with anything? Maybe looking at a discipline issue with students. So our program development coordinators do that. They're also responsible for deliverables with the grant, but up to 70% of their salary is paid for or supplemented with our 21st Century Learning program. And we receive about $4 per student with our 21st Century Learning program, learning centers. Now our enrollment has increased. We've had this program for maybe since 2003, and it was called Zoo Explorers and other names. So right now the grant programs are named after the area that they're in, and I'll show you the slide, the next slide. But if you can see from 2016 to 2017, we have increased the number of students that we are servicing through our 21st Century Grant Program. However, this year, due to COVID, we are down some students. We also, at the beginning of the year, our central grant, we did not have that program. We did not earn that program back when we wrote for the grant, but in January, they let us rewrite for it. So our schools, the central area schools, Gulfview Saturn and Cambridge, we did not have at the beginning of this year, but in January it started back. We started back with them. So now we have about 881 participating in the 21st Century program. This slide talks about our 21st Century grant programs. So for instance, our north area, that's that grant, which sunsets 2025. We just received that one this year. And those schools are Oak Park, Apollo, Coquina, and Mims. And I just talked to you about the central schools. So it's from January 4th to 2022. Endeavor is our grant program that stands alone. And what happened with Endeavor is we did not generate enough income through the BAS session, through the BAS, fee-based component, so we wrote for just Endeavor, and we received that. So you see the East and West. One of the things I do want to highlight is our mainland and South program. We have an asterisk there, and those are the programs that are sunsetting at the end of the year. And the state is not accepting any RFPs for next school year at all. So I know Dr. Mullins was working on some ESSER funds, and I gave him some numbers for that. So we're also looking at additional funds that may be able to support these schools for next year. But as you see, the 2021 schools, which schools will be supported next year. Our summer camp. Our summer camp is a cost sharing, 50-50 cost sharing between Brevard After School and our schools that participate. Now, generally, we try to get schools from the north to the south, and our summer camp, they compete with Parks and Recs and faith-based organization through our summer camp. But I'm excited about our summer camp because our theme this year is around the world in 40 days. So we aren't doing a lot of traveling because of COVID, but we can allow our students to learn what's happening in the world through our summer camp program. Now, the furthest school north is Enterprise this year. Schools apply to participate in the summer camp program, and our coordinators choose, they work with their principal and they decide if they want to apply. And again, I said it was a 50-50 split. So some schools, for instance, have used the money to help pay for their iReady expenses. They decide what expenses they want to pay for through their 50-50. We have in-house field trips. We also have field trips normally in our summer camp program. But this year, because of COVID, there are no outside field trips. So we're bringing our enrichment vendors back in, and they'll do coding and Clazy and those kind of companies will come and do activities with our kids to make it so that we can be able to compete with Parks and Rec. And again, as I said, it's a 50-50 split with our schools. June is great for our after school, for our summer programs. In July, then we need to just, maybe we have less kids that come and participate after July, but this is a great source of helping other schools with the 50-50, earns extra money to do things with. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about our financial overview. This is the Bass Enterprise Fund, is our 5-year fund, 5-year budget. And as you can see, the actuals of 2016-17 for the total revenue is, and that's the first column, is 7.29. And then it increased in 2017-18 and 2018-19. But then at 2019-20, it's a 6.4. And we know in March, we did not come back. Our students did not come back to school, and so that was some income that we lost. And we also did not lay off our employees when our kids did not come back. So if you go to, so that's where we were at 6.4. When you look at our adopted budget, we were anticipating having it at a 7.8. I think that's what you guys adopted last year. But if you look now at the last column, the January 31st, 2021, we have brought in $2.7 million so far this year. I want to talk about the red briefly. So when I first started looking at the budget, I was curious as to why am I seeing so much red with this fund balance. And I want to thank Maureen Mason for really helping me understand this, and she's been very patient. But what happened is around 2013, 2014, the GASB rules change, and that required the schools, the fund, to put in a certain amount of money for their pension. And that was the year that the district transferred the $2.2 million that they would normally transfer, but then another $2 million was transferred for that GASB fund. And if you look at the column from the end, that 395,000 for the 2020 budget, that is a retirement fund. That fee was for the retirement fund also this year. So going back to the, I was just curious about that because I see how much money we were bringing in as revenue, and I understand now that last year you guys decided to raise fees to help offset those costs, but then COVID hit. And so if you see our actuals as of January 31st, and you subtract that number from the beginning fund balance, we are for January at a negative of 1.29. So I want to go next to the next slide. And so the first three columns are from the previous slide, but what Maureen and I did is, or Maureen did it actually, we took the 2.7 million as of January, and we divided it by the 5 months that were left, and that's where we're getting the projected actuals per month for 385,000. But if you look at projected actuals for February 28th, 2021, and you see the other miscellaneous and local sources, that's 715,000 that we wrote for the county CARES program. And remember I said earlier that we did not lay off any of our employees, so we wrote for that. And we also wrote for some PPE and some support to families that could not bring their children back because they would not bring their kids back to school because they didn't have child care. So we wrote for some families, and for the Gulfview, the central schools that lost the grant first semester, so we wrote for some of that. So that's where that 715,000 has come from. If you look at the projected actuals for June 30th, under miscellaneous local resources, that 3,000 is anticipated for rebates from our credit card. So if you look at the actuals as of June 30th, the projected actuals, that we're anticipating a 5.3 million. And then, of course, we have that negative fund balance, and you subtract that out, and we would bring in 1.4 million at the end of June. And remember, we have summer programs, so that is included with those. So our expenditures are 4.8, and then we have the 2.22 million that is transferred back to the operating budget. So that's, if you look at that fund balance, it's going to be at a 5.7, but this year we're actually going to anticipating making 1.4 million, which is down from the 7.8 million and 7.6 million previously. Our lost revenue due to refunds. So from July 1st to December 31st, we have had to refund $19,455. As of February, I just looked at these numbers, as of February 10th, that amount is $21,000, which shows a decrease. This semester, we have not had to refund as much as we have between July and December. And our return charge of pre-billed fees, we bill our fees on Thursday of the week before. So if we have a student that their parents may have prepaid or pre-charged their credit card and they're now out due to COVID, then we charge back their fee to their credit card account. As far as the refund, if they attend 3 days, there is no refund, but you remember when we're quarantining, they're quarantining for 10 days. So we would refund that amount if they can no longer participate for that period. But again, from January until February, that number is decreasing from, it was just 2,000 in January and February, the difference. So our challenges. Our pre-COVID challenge is with the exception of our Clear Lake staff and our school coordinators, all of our staff, they're part-time. And so it can be a 3.5 hours where our group leaders work up to 5 hours. And that could be challenging in itself because some people may not want to come to work for 3.5 hours. And so we average 20 call-ins per day. Last year we had a shortage of 40 group leaders. And that has been one of our challenges. Our morning hours and our parent drop-off is underutilized to justify the cost. Our parents feel that some of our parents, the ones that don't use the morning hours. So I'm going to give you a little story. As a school principal and as a school AP, I would always get to work between 6:45 and 7 in the morning. Well, our aftercare opens at 6:30 a.m. But if a parent has to go to work at 7:30 a.m., most of them would just drop off their kid at 7 a.m. instead of paying for the childcare. So that's one of the challenges. And again, I said it's underutilized to justify the cost, paying for a half hour. But another thing I've learned about our morning hour program, it's just a $5 difference between afternoon and morning and afternoons, just a $5 difference. So one goal is to try to reach the parents that just need it in the morning and to get more parents, because I think we have about 4 programs that don't have a morning program at all. And so one goal for next year is to get more parents interested in the morning program. Our COVID-19 challenges are, we had quite a few 65 and over employees that were kind of nervous about coming back, and so a lot of them either retired or decided to stay home. Our temp services, we could always piggyback on our temp services last year and say we need somebody. But right now, this year, they're rarely available. They don't have people that are interested or wanting to come and work in the schools for that because of the fear of COVID. This year, we have a shortage currently of about 15 group leaders. Now, we've been very strategic at looking at really drilling down and looking at how many kids we have in our programs. So remember, I was talking to you about the ratio, the 1:25 ratio. So let's say I have 26, let's say I have 30. So at 30, that's 3 employees. But if I'm paying for an employee for 5 hours, when at 3:30, I'm down to, let's say, 15 kids, that's not the best use of our time. So we've really drilled down on looking at looking at how many kids we have and at what time we have them. And we've adjusted the hours of our group leaders to save money on that. Another challenge is our reduction in student participants. We have one school that has a lot of e-learners, and that school has probably dropped from 125 kids last year to now about 75 kids, because if they're e-learners, they don't use our program. And I talked about our morning hours and parent drop-off. And another challenge is safety and due to quarantine. So we must keep our kids safe. And if our students are out for 10 days, that's just money that it's more important that they're safe and they're healthy than for us to generate that income. So we give the parents that money back. Our attendance versus enrollment. So I took 1 week, January 29th through February 2nd, or 1 week, the last week of January since 2018, to generate this slide. And this is our total enrollment for all of our programs, not summer, but our 21st century and our BAS program. And what I've noticed is from 2018 to 2021, we have had as little as 87% of our participants to have an average daily attendance. And this year we have about 94% of the weekly enrolled that are participating. One of the things that they are not using this year are our enrichment programs, but you can tell with the 3,773 during that average daily attendance that about 93–94% of those 4,000 have participated in our program. So our next steps, our marketing campaigns. We have, one of the things we do with our marketing campaign is we piggyback on our kindergarten registration. And we have a aftercare member there to share with our parents. We offer this program. So that's when our marketing starts for the next school year during our kindergarten registration. We also start marketing. We market through Peach Jar, we market through Facebook, and we market during the registration time of the programs that we offer our families. And we have one more marketing campaign that's a major campaign that we have through October, and we'll be contacting you again in October for a proclamation. It's called Lights Out, and it's a nationwide event that really sheds light on the need for after-school program. It happens, I think, about October 5th, and some of our community partners and our police officers, they all, it's a big event that we all gather to, it's lights out to make sure we know that a lot of kids are not home by themselves. Sustainability. Our Goal Key, we are re-implementing our Goal Key program. We need to make sure, and this is one of the changes that we're making, because right now, when I was reviewing my slide with my daughter last night, after I finished, she said, "Mommy, I can't tell if you like the program or not." And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, do you want the program or don't you?" And so I said, "Actually, I do like the program." And as a support staff member, I participated in the program as a teacher, as an administrator. From the time it was called EduCare until the time it was BASS, I've participated in the program, and it's a good program. And our staff, we're going to make it great. So through this Goal Key, we're going to maintain safety. We're going to do a checks and balances. Our program development coordinators will visit the schools to coach, to see if there's anything that we need to do that is impacting our kids' safety as far as equipment, or our kids' safety as far as practices that are unsafe practices. As far as financial accountability, our program development coordinators, they will work with our coordinators to make sure that they are billing correctly and that they're looking at our student numbers and our ratios. Sustainability. Can we look back on our program and see growth? Or do we have a program where last year we had 50 kids and this year we have 49 kids? We're not looking at that. We're looking at, well, this year we have 50. Well, let's say how many can we maintain and serve, because this is a service for next year. So our Goal Key is looking at sustainability, financial accountability, and safety. One of the things that when Mrs. Klein was talking about was marrying the BPS, what we stand for, with what Brevard After School stands for. Brevard After School, the staff, they are very committed to making sure our program is safe. But one of the things that I'm learning, and one of the challenges is, what I know as a principal or as a former principal, and looking at the safety and what I need for my school, and as what I know as a parent and what I want for my child, with, do they marry? And so that's one of the challenges that we're working on, bringing our BASS and making it, and because it's an enterprise fund, so it's a part of our organization, but do they feel like they're a part of our organization? And that is one of the goals, because we have a staff that's dedicated. One of the things that our staff is doing, and I didn't mention this earlier, they do, our PDCs, they work half of a day with administrative tasks, and then they go out to the schools and help with coverage. That's one of the things we implemented this year. So I thank you for letting me give you, I thank you for letting me share what we do with Brevard Aftercare. And do you have any questions for me?
Thank you so much, Dr. Ivy, for the presentation and for taking on the task of Brevard Aftercare. Board members have specific comments, questions? Ms. Campbell, you're
Yeah,
giving me the look?
Yeah, just really quick, on the programs, and thank you, this was great. On the programs that you were talking about, the mainland and the south, that are ones that are sunsetting and that we can't apply at this time, right? What if we don't have, whether it's ESSER funds or whatever to supplement for that, what would, in a normal year, what would that look like? Does that mean that those schools that have those 21st century grant programs would have to revert to a traditional paid BAS program, or does it mean just shutting down that they don't have anything?
So we have BAS programs in all of our elementary schools, and so the 21st century supplements that.
Happens at the same time.
Right. Now, one of those schools I was a former principal at, and I think when I first started, they didn't have the program, so they had enough students to continue with BAS.
Okay.
We would lose employees, of course. One of those programs is making money, so they're in the black. And so I'm not so worried about that program, but some of the programs I do have a concern with if we're going to be able to generate enough students. So for a morning program, we need a minimum of 12 students to make it cost effective. And I'm not sure of the numbers for the afternoon program.
Okay.
So we're going to do some marketing to market those programs, and we're looking for other sources.
Okay, but just under normal circumstances, if we lost a grant, it would have to be just a paid program. Okay, that's
Yes.
good. And I was going to ask, I think you kind of answered this, but do we have a need for, because of the reduced usage and e-learning and all of that, lower enrollment, do we have a need for fewer group leaders this year? I know we have a shortage, but we also had a lower need, so that just shows the shortage is smaller, but we also didn't need it. It's still there, right?
Right.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Ms. Jenkins?
I have a question that I kind of know the answer to, and I think you might laugh at me when I ask it, given the financial situation that we're in, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So I know that we don't serve our pre-K students in our aftercare program, and I know that has a little bit to do about ratio to adult to students.
Actually, it doesn't. It's
Okay.
Because I asked that question to my district coordinator. They have a different rules and regulation as far as DCF is concerned. So I know at one point about 4 or 5 years ago, they tried to have, or they were interested in getting 4-year-olds, but we would need to have different inspections, and it's not cost effective based on the rules and requirements of DCF to protect the kids. So that's why we don't have a 4-year program.
Okay. And primarily why I asked that question is just coming from the pre-K ESE world. I know we had a lot of families that opted not to send their child into these early intervention programs at our schools because we don't offer an aftercare program, and there isn't a daycare that they can afford nearby that would offer transportation. And again, I'm well aware of the financial strain on the program as it is, but that's just something that I would love to kind of keep on the burner if we can ever make happen at a minimum at those schools that offer those ESE programs to our pre-K students, just so that our students are getting that early intervention they really need.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other board members? Ms.
Yeah.
McDougall?
I do. Thank you. I think it's a great program. I do have some concerns. I know last year, COVID, of course, has threw all of us for a loop. And so last year we did raise our fees to kind of compensate for that. And of course, here we are. My question is, we typically here take $2 million, I believe, to for us.
2.3.
2.3. So what are we doing this year? Are we going to do that again to this program? Because I'm not sure that they will be able to sustain themselves if we do that. So I'm curious what our thoughts are on that.
Yeah, that's a very, very appropriate question, Ms. McDougall. In the previous presentation, when you saw additional expenses, COVID-related, there was $2.8 million for Brevard Aftercare. That's where We're anticipating a loss of revenue to the general budget, the operating budget from aftercare. It includes the $1 million, and I want to emphasize, we don't give ourselves enough credit sometimes, and particularly the board. This board made the decision and directed us, and with my full support, to pay our aftercare workers for the last quarter of last school year, when we generated $0 of revenue. That was a $1 million obligation that the district sustained for last year. So that's built into the 2.8, and we're currently projecting about a 2.8, and maybe a little bit higher. We're optimistic we're going to get a little bit more participation before the end of the year. But the projected revenue loss for last year and for this coming year is right at $2.8 million right now. The good news is, though, had we not had COVID, and we would have sustained our projected enrollment numbers that you saw earlier on the slide, the fee increase adjustments that were made would have put us in a positive trajectory. So we would, if you look back on that 5-year history, you saw that every year we were coming below our 2.3 million. That's the revenue generated to the operating budget. And it was that gap was continuing to grow. So we were going to be able to narrow or overcome that last year, even until COVID hit. And then, so we're optimistic if we can return to a little bit more normal year next year with the fee increase we implemented previously, we can start to make some corrections. So thank you to the board for a lot of things. One, making the fee adjustment. We still have a very competitive program financially for our community. Thank you for sending the message. We're going to take care of our employees, and for your continued support of the program. If we can't turn the corner, then we're going to be faced with other decisions to make, into next school year for the future of the program. But we still remain optimistic. Would you agree, Dr. Ivey?
I agree.
So
And we're one of the least expensive programs in the
Yes, we
county.
are.
I think we are the least expensive.
So yes, I think we are. So I know that you're looking to advertise more. So I'm hearing that the morning program is not utilized so much. Is there ever a thought that because it is not generating revenue, that it would drag down our program and eliminate it? I mean, I'm not proposing that, but at what point do we say, okay, this is it?
So we have some programs that, again, you need at least 12 to make it worth our while. We have some parents that enroll in morning full program that may not use it. So yes, that is something that we are looking at to do some more marketing for our morning program.
So they enroll in it, but they don't pay until...
They do enroll in it. If they use the full program, remember the afternoon program, the difference between the fee of the afternoon program and the full program is $5. Yeah. So when our parents register, if they say they want afternoon only, we'll suggest, well, you could only pay $5 more, and if you need them in the morning, they'll be there. So we do upsell that.
Okay.
So one of my biggest concern is our name, Brevard Aftercare.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, so we have only 27% of our parents wanting to be in the morning program, but our morning program is not advertised. So as part of the marketing campaign, Dr. Ivory is working on, do we need to look at the name? Because it is not a morning program. So that is one thing. Another piece that she didn't share with you that she's done is when an elementary principal gets involved in everything in their building. And one of the things that was taken off their plate was their involvement with the aftercare program. So a principal didn't know how many more students they needed to make a profit. So Dr. Ivory has worked with food service to develop a profit loss because I started having conversations with the principal. And I said, you know, if you got 3 more students, you would be out of the red. What? So the next thing you know, the next month, they're in the black because they got 5 more students. So it's getting the principals in part of that communication, because the principals and APs can sell the program better than anyone else, and the teachers. So we have to train our teachers on what we offer. We have to train our parents and teach our parents about the benefit of you're getting homework help. I mean, that's huge. And in the 21st century schools, they get tutoring. So there's a lot that we're not selling that Dr. Ivory's working on. Mr. Susan?
First off, I want to say thank you, Dr. Ivory. We had, when you were at Sherwood, did a great job. And we had some students that had they had stayed inside of our aftercare may not have gotten some of the stuff that happened afterwards inside the community. I did want to say thank you to Dr. Mullins for putting together, you know, we talked before about putting those part-time hour groups together, custodians to aftercare, bus drivers to, and some of that's inside of here. So I wanted to say thank you for that and you guys doing it. One of the things I was thinking about over Christmas break, I have a couple of friends that have aftercare programs that are not inside of our schools. One runs a karate out, taekwondo, karate, however you want to call it. There's others. Did we ever think about possibly co-branding with them and pulling them into our schools? She drives, this individual drives to 5 different elementary schools, picks up the kids and goes to this one school. Well, it might be advantageous for her to just put a program in there. We charge her, and she'll pull more people to stay after school. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And our enrichment programs were suspended this year because of COVID, but we do have those programs. We
Just
have
some
had
sort
those
of
programs
private,
previously.
you know what I mean, public entity collaboration, because I know that they pull some of our kids out, so why not pull those kids in? You know what I mean? So that's all. And then if we could pull up the financials, Ms. Lisinski, if you could pull up that last, I think it's second to last slide that's over here. I just had a couple of questions that were on there. I'm sorry, it was the financials that dealt with the monthly breakout for estimated costs per month for the year of 2022 or 2021.
Ms. Lisinski's presentation? Or
No, I'm sorry, it's the aftercare presentation, but I think it has Ms. Lisinski's numbers inside of it.
Dr. Ivory's numbers.
Oh, I know, but Dr. Ivory doesn't do the numbers, does she? The financials? Oh,
She does for this. It's an enterprise fund.
okay, all right, let's put it up there. Second to last slide. I just had a quick question, that's all. Because I was trying to figure something out when I was doing the numbers. There it is. Okay, so we have charges for services. We actually got $2.7 million in the 4.5 months ahead of time. And then if you break that down, it goes between $500,000 and $600,000 a month, but then we dropped down to $385,000. And I didn't know, are we seeing a decline or an increase of kids coming into our aftercare programs as the year progresses?
We've seen more. We've seen more.
Okay, so that number will probably be a whole lot more than $385,000. It'll probably, if you take 2.7 million, which is the first 4.5 months, because August we were barely here. Christmas, we were missing 2 weeks, right? Or a week. You know, you put that together, you got about 4.5 months. Divide 4.5 into 2.7, you roughly get between 500 and 600. So we may not be in as bad of trouble, is what I'm trying to get at. I like you always doing conservative. Okay, I know that's what you did. But I just wanted to say to the board, when you look at that, and then you look at how we dropped in materials and supplies, capital out, like all of the other categories dropped. So we are going to see a little bit of a profit. We're just not going to see that much that we steal the 2.1 from them every year. You know what I mean? So that's all. I just wanted to say thank you. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Ivory. Just a few more questions for you. One, I love that Ms. Klein mentioned the name, because that was the first thing that I was thinking when you were talking about the morning program, and I love that you are looking at potentially naming it differently. I would also love it if that name incorporated like the academic, not Belford, the academic benefits of being there, right? Because in all the years that I have been around our elementary schools, I've never heard that program sold as anything other than childcare.
It's interesting that you say that because when my son first participated in the program, it was called Educare. And I remember until I became a principal, I always called it Educare. So yes.
Yeah, and I think that makes, I mean, how many parents are frustrated right now with trying to assist their students when they could go and get homework help? And instead of coming home from work every day and having to cook and do homework help when their kids can come home done with their homework, they can enjoy family time. We know the importance of family dinners for child success, right? So I think there's a ton of stuff there that we can do from the marketing perspective that would have a huge impact on participation in the program. So I thank you for looking at that. Looking at our summer programs, what is the approximate revenue per school in our summer programs? Do you know?
Actually, I don't have those numbers with me.
Okay.
And I'm going to go based on memory, but it's different based on the different programs.
Okay.
One of the things I discovered when we were looking at those numbers, depending on what area, depends on how much. But we also saw that if we did not, so in June is when most of the people participate in the program. In July, after 4th of July, we don't have a lot of kids coming back. So one of the things that struck me was, as a light bulb, when I saw the numbers generated in June versus the numbers generated in July, one school, for instance, ended up only bringing in $4,000 because they didn't. One of the things we do for summer school, we say if we don't have the kids, then for third grade camp, we tell the teachers up front, if we don't have the kids, then we can't keep you. Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't do that for aftercare. So after July 5th, one school had a certain amount, but their take home was $4,000 after the summer because the employees were not told that once the kids leave, then what's going to change, and that happened the 2016 school year, and I can't remember what other school year, but I saw so much red. And so one of the things that we're going to do now is up front is if we don't have the kids after July, then we're going to reduce employees, and that's going to help. But one school had about 4,000, and then another school had maybe 11,000. So it depends on how many kids you bring in, but it also depends on if we're really looking at our numbers and reducing staff once we no longer need them.
And that might also motivate staff to better market their programs so that they can continue to get paid for July as well. So
right.
that may be a win-win. You mentioned that the schools have to apply in order to do the summer program. Have we had the same basic schools doing the summer program, or has it shifted year to year?
Kind of both, really. Now, certain schools that are nearby, like take, for instance, the Rockledge area, Anderson and Williams, they usually apply every year, so they take turns. We had a new school to apply this year, Columbia. They had not participated before. So it all depends. Longleaf they apply every year and they get it every year. So we also look at location, and Longleaf is right at a location where they can service that Suntree area, the Sherwood area. They can service those kids. So it depends. And the aftercare person, the coordinator, they need to work. Sometimes we can get a coordinator from another school, but they may not want to work during the summer, so they can go to their principal, and if they wanted to work, and say, let's apply. And we want people that want to work because they can bring in more and they can do more for the program.
Right, that makes sense. We talked a little bit about enrollment. How does our enrollment compare to our capacity, especially with regard to the 21st century? So I know when we first started the 21st century programs, because of that requirement that the students be there until 5:45, and I think it was actually 6 when we started, maybe. But we had some difficulty getting those slots filled because people didn't want to make that time commitment. So they didn't want to, you know, if they got home from work at 5 o'clock, they didn't have to have to go back out and get the kid or whatever. So are we, in those 21st century programs, are we utilizing all of our capacity in those programs?
Not this year, but most of our capacity is because of COVID.
Okay.
And that is still the challenge with the 547. That is still a challenge. We still have parents that want to bring them home before that.
Right. Have we had, just because I know this has been an ongoing conversation, have we reached out to the supporters of the grants on that time issue that, you know, gosh, we could probably serve 60% more kids if it went until 5 o'clock mandatory?
I'm not sure of that answer, so I can find out.
Okay, super, thank you. I think that is all the questions that I had. Thank you so much for a great presentation and for tackling a beast.
Okay, you're welcome.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So I'm just a little confused about the fee and payment schedule and how that works, because I'm coming from the mindset of my daughter's in a community daycare in VPK, and I pay a monthly fee, and if she doesn't show up, I'm still paying. So when you talk about that summer program, when you talk about the kids drop off in July, are they paying per month, or are they paying for the summer program in totality? How is that working? Are they paying weekly?
They pay weekly.
Okay. So we don't know in the beginning of the summer what their expectations are.
Right.
Right. Okay.
One of the questions, I mean, I think to both of your point, one of the questions I asked is, not only do we have the most cost favorable program in the county, but our fee structure and our fee forgiveness appears to be extraordinarily favorable to the participants at the potential expense of the program. So I've encouraged them, we need to look at that. We certainly want to be responsive and supportive to our families, particularly during COVID, but as we look to cost-benefit analysis, it's an enterprise. We've got to take care of business. So they're looking at that as well.
All right, nothing else? Thank you again, Dr. Mullins.
Well, if we're done with Brevard Aftercare, if I may, it dawned on me, we have a second enterprise entity here in Brevard Public Schools, Food and Nutrition Services. And as I've been in conversation with superintendents across the state, as we all are wrestling with the same kind of challenges, there's one challenge we do not have that several other districts do have, and that is their food service programs can't light a candle to the efficiency and the quality of the service that our food service program does. If you go back to the slide of additional costs for COVID, what is not reflected, and I asked, what is not reflected there is food and nutrition services. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity. This is totally impromptu. I don't know if Mr. Thornton is watching in the back on TV, but Mr. Novelli will pass it along. Food and nutrition services provided meals when we were closed, provided meals all summer, and has adjusted and pivoted during this declining enrollment of e-learners on top of less students. And they have remained in the black with their program. They have sustained their fund balance, and I'm hearing other districts, their food and nutrition services have had to go into their fund balance by $10 million. So that district was quite a bit larger than us, but in proportion, that could have been $3, $4, $5 million for us. And I asked in preparation for all of this and was affirmed that no, food nutrition services have done what we needed to do, and we remain a completely self-sustaining enterprise function in our district. That's huge. And so I don't want to miss the opportunity to give Mr. Thornton, his team, who have just continued to rise to the challenges and the program, and provided great service, great product, and a great value to our kids and our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins, and thank you, Mr. Thornton and your team. We appreciate it immensely. Hearing no further business, we will adjourn this meeting.